5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The average adult American goes throughout their entire workday without a meaningful interaction with another human being. And one of the simplest ways that we can live out our call to missionary discipleship is by intentionally interacting with the people that we bump up against on an everyday basis. But how do we do that, and why do we need to do that? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Ignition. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, and we want to set your faith ablaze so that you may live the adventure that comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Before we get into today's topic, we want you to know that we love listener feedback. So if you've got questions about today's episode, or if you have ideas for future episodes, please contact us. The easiest way to do so is by email, and the address is ignition@sfcatholic.org. Again, ignition@sfcatholic.org. I am joined in studio for the first time in like half a year by Emily Leedom. Hey, Emily.
Hello, Christopher.
So, Emily, guess what?
What? Tell me.
So, I did a little research before we recorded.
Okay. Should I be nervous?
No. This is really good. So,
Okay.
It's 2023.
Yes, it is.
This episode, which is episode 544 of Ignition, It's 2023, and this is your 23rd appearance.
Is it really?
On Ignition. How about that? The year 2023.
You can't make that stuff up.
Episode, and this is your 23rd appearance.
I've been on 23 episodes of Ignition.
Times. Two of those, a few of them. Your first episode was November 6th of 2013-ish. Renee Leach.
Do I sound like a baby?
I didn't listen to it, to be honest. I doubt you did. I'm sure you sound like a polished young woman. So 10 years, because you've been with the diocese.
10 years.
It'll be this 10 years this year.
10 years this September. So I made a joke about that, by the way, and told Bishop that I was really, really excited for that 10-year bonus trip to Mexico or something like that. And he looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. I thought it was so funny.
I think I pointed out at that point that you were technically not with the diocese anymore.
Yeah, it totally backfired. They were like, actually, she works at the Lord's Center, so she's not eligible. Whatever. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was episode 155, November of 13 was your first, and we're at 155, 544. Like 155, 544. Like, I don't know, that doesn't, like, I love it when my, okay.
I honestly have no idea what you're talking
episode 155.
Yes.
Was your first appearance.
Okay.
So one, and then number, repeat number.
Yeah.
155. Okay. This is episode 544. 5, repeat number.
I'm officially with you. I'm not as excited as you are, but I am totally with you.
You should be, though. If you are present to me right now, which is what we're going to be talking about shortly, you should be just
I am
as
so
excited.
Open. That is really, really fantastic, Chris. Tell me more about your heart. I'm ready to listen and receive all of who you
Jermaine,
are.
My wife, is who you know, I'm the person who gets super excited with the odometer, like when you get like the big zeros, like 1,000.
That's interesting because you don't strike me as a numbers person.
Oh, yeah. So this is, you knew me you don't know me post. You know me post, yeah, I'm waving. We're doing the breaststroke here.
We're swimming.
We're swimming. I was a math and science guy in college and high school.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so calculus, number. Yeah, I'm like, okay. There's some undiagnosed OCD things that I'm always doing that are usually numbers based.
Well, I knew that.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Executive Director of the Lord's Center, Emily Leedom, everybody. Thanks for being on. Good to see you. Take care, everybody. No, we got about 25 minutes to go. So, with that completely, this is a good podcast. I don't know about radio, but this is a good podcast.
Yeah,
I'm feeling good about this rambling, inane conversation.
You know how much I love a ramble.
So, how about the hook, though? I thought that was I saw you nodding on the hook, right?
Nailed it.
So this is something that I've been talking about for a while. So in the context of missionary discipleship, people think of to be a missionary means I got to talk to people, cold call. No. It's much more, it can be that, but there are so many ordinary everyday things we can do. And one of them is to simply really see, not like in a weird way, but just be present to the people, whether it's our family members, spouses, kids, or the grocery store checkout clerk. Mm-hmm. So I know that I had asked you about a topic to talk about today, and you had the one in mind as you were describing this. Like, oh my gosh, this reality that the average American goes throughout their workday without a meaningful interaction. Yeah, I think is exactly what you're going to be talking about today with us.
Yeah, I think you launched in the intro so beautifully into really my heart and where I started to become interested in this topic of basically of affirmation, and I'll put a lot of flesh on that, but I don't mean affirmation in the sense of like, oh, good job with the intro, Chris.
Right.
I really mean in that sense of being an affirming presence to another human being, being a person that can receive the other. Essentially. And I mean, you see this all over the Gospels, but increasingly in the last maybe 6 months or so, just through a couple of kind of key interactions that I've had with people in my life, I've started to see, recognize, notice the ways in which a lot of people are not doing well. A lot of people are not doing well. They feel disconnected. They feel separate from others. They feel unseen, unknown. I mean, it's a myriad of things. There's a whole spectrum of this experience for individuals. And part of it is, I, as you said, I'm the executive director of the Lord's Center. A primary thing that we do is mental health counseling. We do a lot of one-on-one counseling work with people. And so we just get to be on the receiving end of people that are ready to do the work to figure out, okay, what do I need to be flourishing, to be thriving? And this is a theme that comes up is especially as people start to explore, maybe look at some of their childhood experiences or key experiences, high school, early young adulthood. There's a common theme that's coming forward of places in which people are experiencing unlove, or a lack of affirmation, and that has a real impact. On the human person, and there's lots of fascinating kind of psychological studies that you can look at that show this. Even infants from early on that are separated from adult contact or something like that, like the children fail to thrive. So there's a real need that we have to be seen, to be known, to be recognized by the other. And I think in the world in which we live in today, this is just becoming more and more prevalent. Yeah,
you disconnected, unseen, and unknown. And I mean, things that I've looked at from my perspective as in discipleship formation, that's being borne out by study after study after study. Like, again, the stat that I gave at the beginning, most of us don't have a meaningful interaction through most of our workday, which is just, your heart breaks we have so much abundance, but not an abundance of affirmation in that more authentic sense that you spoke to. And you also used we have an experience of unlove. And what struck me about that is I would assume that's distinct from like hate. We're not talking about, it's not just an experience of being hated. Most people don't have that, thanks be to God, but even being unloved.
Yes. Yeah, it's so a lot of this, I said I've started to kind of grow in my interest of this topic. And one of the things that I read, I'm a student of this topic right now because I'm interested in it. And but one of the things that I read, and I have it with me, it's called Born Only Once. It's Conrad Bahr's, who's a really remarkable Catholic psychologist. His daughter now has kind of taken up a lot of his work and is present in common Catholic books and conferences and that kind of thing, Suzanne Bahr's. But he writes about really his whole topic, or this whole book is about affirmation and kind of healing the unaffirmed, essentially, and looking at people who are struggling on a various spectrum of emotional deprivation disorder. And he talks about that experience of unlove as some sort of denial. Anybody who has experienced this kind of lack of affirmation, at the heart of it is this common theme of a denial. And that can be direct, as in, you are not good, go away from me, I don't like you, you're a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. That's a very direct denial. Or it can be indirect. And I was really convicted reading some of his descriptions of indirect denial. I was very convicted as a mother. Thinking, oh man, there's so many times where in my failure to really love my children, I'm never going to love my children perfectly. You're never going to love your children perfectly, your spouse, anything like that. But just becoming more deeply aware of the places that I need to grow in my ability to love. But like some of his examples of indirect denial are ignoring another, so walking the other way in the hallway, something like that, drawing attention to another person's faults, belittling, backbiting, gossiping, unwarranted or tactless criticisms, ingratitude, which really struck me. Being too busy when the other person needs you. I mean, that's when a real conviction came up. Honey, I'm trying to make dinner, or I need to get the laundry done, or I need to do this, this, and this. But Mom, I just want to read a book.
Right.
Mommy, can we read this book? Can we play this game? Another one that really struck me, not allowing the other to cry or show anger or other emotions. And we are so good at this in Western civilization, by the way. Like I look at grief. If you look at the way that Americans respond to grief as opposed to the way that African people respond to grief, like the funerals look vastly different. African individuals, there's wailing, and there's a real boisterous grieving process. And that's really good, I think. I think that's really actually helpful and healthy. Americans, we think, just keep it together. You can do this.
Right.
Keep it together.
Yep.
You're not, I know she's not handling that well.
Right.
We don't allow each other to grieve. And in a sense, that's this certain form of denial of, that's really contributing on a deep level, I think, to societal, just discontent and feeling, like I said earlier, unknown, unseen, unloved, because there's not space for our real emotions to come forward.
So how did you get, why is this so interesting to you? Why have you become a student of this in the last 6 months? I get the why. If you can say it in a generic way.
No. It's a good question. It's a good question. I think, in part, I had an experience with somebody in my life that I just kind of kept on running into this wall with of like, I just don't understand what's happening here. Yep. Like this real need for affirmation and kind of some insecurity that was coming out in them. And so I started to wonder, like, what's at the core of that? Actually, I can think of 2 people probably in the last 5 years that I've kind of seen this or noticed this. And I just started to also, this is connected but separate, I started to notice that in a lot of Myers-Briggs or charism, the Siena Institute charism stuff, or I don't know, any of those like kind of personality sort of things, you start to see affirmation shows up in one way or another in almost all of them. It either shows up as a need for particular personality types. I would say it's a need for all personality types, but it's heightened in multiple, like INTJs, for example, or I can't remember I can't remember the other one, that it's like rated as a high need for them, sort of thing. So I started to just notice that people in the field were paying attention to the importance of affirmation, and I kind of started to wonder, to what degree does this really have power? And then in the therapeutic process, so I don't sit one-on-one with people as a one-on-one counselor, but a lot of the work that we do around healing, I just started to wonder, what's the role of presence? More than words, more than teaching, more than what we say, what's the role of presence? I went to a healing retreat the JP2 Healing Center puts on, and Sister Miriam Heidland was one of the speakers. Sister Miriam, to me, has this presence about her that is healing in itself. I don't remember a whole lot of what she said, but her presence had healing power because people in the room knew that they were loved by her. And there was a great tenderness with which she approached them. I wasn't within, 500 feet of her. I'm in the very back of this huge, massive church and experiencing in her a healing presence, a loving presence, that I could have gone up and probably told her that I murdered somebody yesterday, and I would have been received. She'd say, go to the police and all that too. But like I didn't murder anybody.
She would affirm you. Good for you.
Right. She wouldn't say like, oh, that's great. Yeah. Obviously. But in her presence, there's a healing, because she has that way of affirming the other, not by words, but by presence. So that's a long-winded answer to your question of what kind of got me interested in this, but it's kind of been a series of ongoing.
So it's interesting you bring up the importance of presence. And I talked, I think, at the opening, just being present, truly present with other people. One of the things, I don't know if I've said this out loud before. Well, to anybody but the Lord. Part of my daily prayer, Emily, is I pray that can be more present, and I specifically name my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
Because I think that, unfortunately, just the way life is structured these days, where in our era, and there's no easy solution to this, but where I spend, sort of my prime hours are at work.
Yeah.
And by the time I get home,
you're done.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I turn to things like YouTube or my phone or whatever. Distraction. Mm-hmm. And so I've really, for months and months and months, maybe years even at this point, just been praying for the grace to really be present to my wife and kids, in addition to all the other people that I'm present with in my daily life.
Have you seen fruit come from that prayer?
I don't know if I have yet, to be honest. That doesn't mean there's not fruit, but have I seen the fruit? I don't know that I've seen fruit yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's a battle.
Yeah.
I think it's a real battle, and it's why it's a saintly life is heroic. Heroic. Amen. There's a reason we call it heroic virtue. Yep. To go against the grain or to go against the culture, the culture of distraction, the culture that we constantly have things that are dinging or noise that's going on or whatever. Like, it's very, very difficult. Yeah, right. It's very, very difficult. And then too, the nature of just almost like the polarization of the world that we live in. I think like we have a very divisive.
Oh, right. Yep.
It's a very divisive world, and increasingly I'm starting to notice the way that makes it just really difficult to really be present to people. Like we're just coming off the holiday seasons. Yep. I'm sure a lot of people listening had somebody at Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner that they were kind of nervous to be in their family, that they were kind of nervous to sit down at the table with.
Right.
Because we have very differing views, and where once that was kind of normal and accepted and okay, now it's very divisive.
Yep.
So I think that makes it increasingly difficult to really be present to people, to really encounter, to not be distracted, or to not put up kind of walls or barriers around our own hearts, because we're afraid. We're often afraid of other people.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Folks, if you're just tuning in when you're listening to Ignition, I'm Dr. Chris Bergwald, talking today with Emily Leedom, Executive Director of the Lord's Center, about just the need to be present to others, to see them, and the power of presence in the context of the need that we all have for affirmation, as you explained earlier, authentic affirmation. So, Emily, we got about 10 minutes left. I definitely want to, at some point before we're takeaways, like what are some things that we can do to be better at being present to others, in addition to simply praying, as I have been for a long time, for the gift to be present. But before we get to takeaways, I don't want to, there's more groundwork that needs to be laid. I want to make sure that you have the space and freedom to do so.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I think I think one of the key ideas that really has resonated with me, and we touched on it earlier, is just that idea of denial and starting to pay attention to where are the places in my life that I am in an unhealthy way denying another. And by the way, that does not mean putting up boundaries. That does not mean that we need to say yes to everything. It's really more the way in which we are loving the other. So I think just my real desire for myself and for listeners is to start to really pay attention to where are those places where I maybe am denying another, my wife, my husband, my children, denying them the love that they deserve, not being completely present, like we were talking about earlier. And then I think at the heart of it is we need to practice unconditional love. We need to really practice unconditional love, which is so hard. We live in a world that's, I love you and I want you to blank. And I do this to my husband all the time. Like, I love you so much. Will you get me a cup of tea? Right? Okay, so and I know that's a funny example.
No, I know. So I know that's a funny example, but is that really conditional love? Why is that? Or maybe you want to give a different example.
Well, let me think of a better example. That's such a funny example because that's me like trying to get what I want. And I hopefully do. I do love my husband unconditionally.
I thought you meant hopefully you do get what you want, but I understand.
I hopefully do. Okay. I was going to say hopefully I do get my cup of tea too. I'm trying to think of a better example. I think of maybe a parent with a grown child who they've just really, really, really struggled with this child for whatever reason. Yep. That's not a good example either. What's a good example of conditional love? To play that out a little bit, say the child is like in the throes of addiction. There's two responses that the parent can have. They can either say they can either continue to love their child in the middle of that, or they can kind of be like, whatever, I'm done, I'm over it, and distance themselves, not out of a boundary, but out of their own anger or frustration with their child. Does that make sense? Yep. That's not a great example either, but I'm struggling to come up with one. I'm sure I'll be laying in bed tonight and I'll come up with 5. But but I think we know that. Or even like me as a mom and my girls, like with my girls, am I only rewarding them and really loving them, showing them, expressing my love to them when they do what I ask? Brush your teeth, get your hair, hair brushed, yada, yada, yada. Or in the example that happened just a couple days ago, my sweet Magdalene had a full-on tantrum, chucked a ball at a wall, scared the heck out of me. So Magdalene Jane, I brought her upstairs. My instinct was to yell, to say, you cannot do that. That is not allowed in our house. And by the grace of God, I held her on my lap and we rocked. And I said, I'm here. I see you. We'll get through this together. I'm with you. And the calm that set into the room was very different than had I put her in timeout, shut the door, and walked away. And I don't know, I don't know the answer to these things. Like I said, I am a student of this topic because I am trying to figure out what does this look like in the context of parenting or in the context of like healthy dynamics and relationships and, like I said, in boundaries. And, it's not like, okay, yeah, Megs, go ahead and throw the ball at the wall again. That's not it either. But am I, is my presence unconditional?
Yeah, I was thinking you much earlier in this episode, you give the example of, again, one of your girls, maybe you're in the middle of making dinner or whatever. Mommy, can read the book. You can't literally put the ladle down necessarily. Maybe you can. So sometimes, but I wonder if it's not, but how do I just dismiss my child in that circumstance? Right. Or am I able to, while I'm stirring, just say, hey, sweetie, I will definitely read the book. I just can't right now because I'm making dinner. So I think maybe it's how the interactions unfold.
100%. And so often I'm like, nope, not right now. And I'm like busybody sort of response. And it is dismissive as opposed to, I see you. I hear you. I would love to play that game with you. I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, that's when I'll be ready to play the game or whatever, you know?
Right.
I don't know. I think it's complex, but I think it's so much as with all things, it's a disposition of the heart.
Right.
And really, Conrad Barrs, he notes that one of the defining symptoms of an affirming person or an affirmed person is openness, which I thought was really beautiful. And he used the example of Pope John the 23rd. And he gave several examples, like when he met the Kennedys, for example. Apparently, Pope John the 23rd, before he went to meet the Kennedys, asked, his secretary or whatever, what's the appropriate term? How do I greet Jacqueline Kennedy? And they said, Madam President or Mrs. Kennedy would be fine. And he opened the door and just completely spontaneously, he threw his arms open and said, "Oh, Jacqueline," and gave her a big hug. And in her own just receptivity of him, hugged him right back.
Right.
So just these simple little fun examples. But, and I think we can think of those people, for me, it was a priest that I studied under when I was in Rome named Father Carolla. his ability to be so present to all of us simultaneously.
Right.
I still to this day have no idea how I felt so loved by him as one amidst,
many
30, 40 other students.
By the way, I was struck by that when you mentioned the example of Sister Miriam.
Yeah.
Right? Just like being present one, I'm definitely not perfect, but I can visualize what it means to be present to a single person right now, but how to be present to dozens or even hundreds where they're all going to, as you described with Sister, where they would all feel that I'm present to them it just blows my mind.
If that's not the Holy Spirit, I don't know what is. Right. Like the Holy Spirit who duplicates the loaves and the fishes, like he duplicates presence in such a powerful way. And I think it's really... It's so attractive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
So attractive. And I think when we talk about missionary discipleship through God's love, one of the things that I always think of is just how can we be more of a bridge rather than an obstacle for other people to encounter Christ? Yep. And part of what it means to be a bridge is to be a living witness, which is unbelievably magnetic. It's attractive.
Absolutely.
And how can my presence as an affirmed person, by the way, I have to do my own work first to make sure that I'm really living in that reality, because if I don't know who I am, if I feel unseen, unknown, unwanted, it's going to be really difficult for me to be able to give that to the other. Like I need to receive that first and foremost as my identity as a beloved from the Lord and from people in my life. Like it's, and I think that's really critical. Like this comes from the Lord and it comes from the way in which he operates in the world, which is through you and me, primarily.
So we've got about half a minute left, Emily.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this all day.
I know. So but we'll have to have you back at some point for episode, I don't know, 555, because then the numbers would all be the same.
Again.
I would love that. So you mentioned Conrad Bars, who has passed away, but his daughter Suzanne Bars?
I think it's Suzanne Bars,
are two particular scholars, thinkers on this, writers on this. Any other resources come to mind in the next 10 seconds that you might recommend?
Yeah, the only ones I would say is the JP2 Healing Center's work, Be Healed, Be Restored. Some of those I think are really good places to start as well, to just take a deeper look at where are some of these wounds and how do I experience restoration.
We'll have you back in 11 episodes, Emily.
I can't wait.
Thanks, Emily. And folks, that wrap up this episode. Again, you can email us ignition@sfcatholic.org with any questions about today's episode or ideas for future ones. Until next time, may God bless you.